Hey everyone, ever look at a tree and think like, man, what has this thing seen?
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to be diving into some of those secrets, these like strange blue rings they're finding inside trees up in Norway.
Wow.
We've got this scientific article, Scientists Decode the Secret of Unusual Blue Rings in Norway's Trees.
Okay.
Ready to learn what they are
Yeah, definitely.
and what they can tell us about the past?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's fascinating how something as, simple as a tree ring can offer such a window into history.
Yeah, so what exactly are these blue rings?
Well, they're not something that you would just see by looking at a tree trunk. They only show up when scientists take a core sample from a tree and then stain it.
Oh, interesting.
And what they've found is that these blue rings are actually growth rings, but growth rings with a twist.
Okay.
They seem to represent years when the tree's growth process
Hmm.
kind of didn't quite finish properly.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a...
The article describes them as looking like unfinished growth rings, which I thought was a really striking image.
Unfinished growth rings.
Yeah.
So why would a tree's growth get, interrupted in that way?
Well, the culprit seems to be cold summers.
Oh, really?
You see, for a tree to grow properly, it needs a certain number of warm days.
Mm-hmm.
And if the summer is too cold,
Okay.
the cells that make up the new growth ring don't fully harden.
Interesting.
And this incomplete hardening, or lignification, as it's called,
Right.
is what causes that unique blue color when the wood is treated with the stain.
Okay, so it's not just about the cold itself.
Yeah.
It's about the timing of the cold.
Exactly.
A cold snap the wrong time of year could really just
Yeah,
throw a wrench in the whole growth cycle.
absolutely.
So, and these blue rings, they're not just found anywhere, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where do they find them?
The researchers were specifically focused on trees growing in a pretty extreme environment,
Uh-huh.
high up on the tree line of Mount Yekres in northern Norway. Oh, wow.
Yeah, they study both Scots pine trees and common juniper shrubs.
Right.
And those blue rings popped up in both.
So, that's a pretty harsh landscape to begin with.
Absolutely.
I imagine
Yeah.
those cold summers are really tough.
It's a testament to their resilience, isn't it?
Yeah, so how did they figure out,
Mhm.
the years when those summers happened?
It involves some pretty meticulous work.
Okay.
As I mentioned before,
Mm.
you can't just glance at a tree and see the blue rings.
Mm.
It takes this whole process of extracting core samples,
Okay.
staining them, and then examining them under a microscope.
Mm.
And even then, deciphering those blue ring patterns
Okay.
is a lot more complex than just your typical tree ring analysis.
I bet. So that was pretty time-consuming then.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The researchers actually mentioned that studying blue rings requires a much longer protocol
Wow.
than traditional dendrochronological studies.
But their persistence paid off because they were able to actually pinpoint some specific years where those blue rings were particularly prominent.
So what years are we talking about here?
2 years really stood out, 1902 and 1877.
Okay.
Both of those years showed a significantly higher number of blue rings in both the pine trees and the juniper shrubs.
Wow. Okay, so 1902, 1877.
Yeah.
What was happening then
Wow.
to make the summers so cold?
In 1902, the region experienced its coldest June on record.
Wow.
This extreme cold delayed the start of the growing season.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though the early wood, the first part of the growth ring, seemed to form relatively normally,
Okay.
there just wasn't enough time in that shortened season for the late wood to develop properly.
Hmm.
That's why we see those blue rings.
So it's like they started growing
Right.
normally,
Yeah,
and then they got hit with this cold snap, and it just threw them all off.
that's a great way to put it.
Okay. And then 1877.
Yeah, so it appears this year had a cold snap in August,
Uh-huh.
which, again, would have just, disrupted that tree's growth pattern.
So 2 different years.
Yeah.
2 different cold snaps.
Yeah.
Both leaving their mark as these blue rings.
Yeah.
What caused the temperature to drop so suddenly, though?
That's where things get really interesting. The
Uh-huh.
researchers,
Hmm.
they have this rather intriguing theory.
Intriguing, huh? I'm all ears.
Yeah. They think it might be connected to volcanic eruptions that happened around the same time. Specifically, the eruption of Mount Pelée in 1902
Okay.
and the eruption of Cotopaxi in 1877.
Volcanoes. Hold on. How could a volcano
Yeah.
in Martinique and Ecuador
Yeah.
affect the climate all the way over Norway.
Well, it's all about the scale of these eruptions.
Right.
When a volcano erupts explosively,
Mm.
it releases massive amounts of ash and gases
Right.
into the atmosphere, and these particles, they can spread across the globe and actually block out sunlight,
Oh, interesting.
leading to a cooling effect on the climate.
So it's like it's dimming the sun.
It's like a giant sunshade.
Yeah.
Yeah, that dims the sun's energy for a period of time.
Okay, so these tiny rings in Norway
Yeah.
are reflecting these huge global events.
It really highlights
They're thousands of miles away.
how interconnected our planet is.
That's wild.
Yeah, but they weren't content with just drawing a connection between these specific eruptions and the blue rings.
Right.
They wanted to see if they could find evidence of other cold summers, potentially linked to other volcanic events.
Did they find any?
Well, they did find signs of other possible cold snaps,
Mm-hmm.
but the data wasn't as clear-cut.
Mm.
For one thing, there were gaps in the historical weather records
Oh.
for the region.
Yeah, okay.
Plus, the researchers pointed out
Uh,
that the temperatures experienced by those trees high on the mountainside
okay.
might have been slightly different from what was actually recorded at the weather station
Okay.
further down the valley.
So it's like trying to put together a puzzle with some of the pieces missing.
Exactly. And that's what makes this research so exciting, right?
Uh-huh.
There's still so much more we can learn from these blue rings.
Yeah.
And the researchers are hoping this study
Okay.
will inspire others to start looking for blue rings in their own tree samples
Okay.
from around the world.
It's like a global network of blue rings.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
We could map out the history of cold summers
Yeah.
across continents and centuries.
And see how they impacted the forests.
Exactly.
Wow, that would be incredible.
It would be a game changer for
Yeah.
understanding past climates.
Yeah, and even maybe like predicting how future climate change
Yeah.
might impact forests.
That's a really great point.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just about looking back, but also about using that knowledge
Right?
to understand what might lie ahead.
Especially with, climate change these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the potential for more extreme weather.
And the article actually touches on a point that adds another layer to this whole thing.
Okay.
They found that pine trees
Oh.
seem to be more sensitive to blue ring formation
Interesting.
than the juniper shrubs.
Hmm.
In fact, they called the juniper shrubs
Okay.
the true heroes of the North
Wow.
because of their ability to withstand those
Right.
harsh conditions.
So even within a single location,
Yeah,
different species are going to respond differently.
precisely.
Yeah.
And understanding those differences in sensitivity
Mhm.
could be crucial for conservation efforts.
Yeah.
If we know which species are most vulnerable
Okay.
to these climate-induced disruptions,
Right.
we can focus on protecting them.
Makes you really appreciate all the information
Yeah,
we can get from trees.
absolutely.
It's like they've been keeping track of climate history
They're like these silent sentinels of the forest.
for centuries.
Yeah.
Long before we had the instruments to do so.
That's why this research is so valuable. It's
Yeah.
unlocking this whole new way of understanding the past.
And potentially the future.
Right.
We've talked a lot about the broader implications.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to go back to the blue rings themselves.
Okay.
The article mentioned that they could be a sign
Yeah.
of something more serious for the trees.
You're right.
Yeah.
While those blue rings might seem like just a visual curiosity,
Yeah.
they can actually indicate
Right.
underlying stress for the tree.
Mm.
The researchers found that in these boreal regions,
Okay.
blue rings can weaken the structural integrity of a pine tree.
So they make it weaker.
Yeah, making it more susceptible to damage
Oh.
from things like disease or strong winds.
Okay, so it's not just a cosmetic change.
Exactly.
It's like a sign of vulnerability.
It's a reminder that even subtle changes in climate
Yeah.
can have this cascading effect on the health and resilience of an entire ecosystem.
This deep dive has given me a whole new appreciation
Yeah.
for all the hidden stories that trees can tell us.
And the importance of listening to those stories,
Yeah.
not just for understanding the past,
Right.
but for shaping a more sustainable future.
It's crazy. We started with this whole idea of blue rings, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Something that most people would probably never even notice.
right.
And look where we are now.
It's the power of curiosity, right?
Totally.
How something so small can unlock so much knowledge.
Yeah, and as we've been saying, it's not just a cool phenomenon.
No, definitely not.
They're a record of past climates, these cold summers.
Yeah, those cold snaps that disrupted the tree's growth.
Exactly, and we even talked about how they're linked
Yeah.
to those volcanic eruptions.
Like halfway around the world.
Yeah, that was crazy. It really shows how connected everything is, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think what's most exciting to me is the potential this research has moving forward. Building this global network
Yeah.
of blue ring data.
Imagine that.
It would be amazing. We could map out the history of cold summers.
Across continents, centuries.
Yeah, and see how they impacted the forests.
Exactly. It would be a game changer
Yeah, completely.
for understanding past climates.
And then, using that to figure out how future climate change might impact things too.
Absolutely. It's not just about looking back.
Yeah.
It's about looking forward as well.
And remembering which tree species are most vulnerable.
Right. Yeah, that's key for conservation.
Totally.
Knowing what to protect.
It really makes you appreciate trees in a whole new way, right?
Yeah.
They've been holding on to all this information
Solar time capsules.
for centuries.
Yeah, they've seen it all.
It makes you wonder what other secrets
Oh, I'm sure there are tons.
they're holding,
Yeah.
waiting to be discovered.
That's the best part of science,
Yeah.
There's always something new.
Always more to learn.
More to uncover.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I have this whole new perspective
Yeah, me too.
on trees and what they can teach us.
I hope it inspires our listeners to see the world differently.
Yeah. And you never know.
Right.
You might discover something amazing yourself.
Exactly. Keep exploring.
Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks for listening.